Today we've got a very fun project in. This is a beautiful olive green stayer. Now, most of the work on this has been done by my colleagues, but they've stumbled across a problem and they've come and asked me for help. Exactly the right thing to do, because this customer came in with lots of little niggles to his bike, wanted us to sort them out, but the biggest niggle was the rear brake was always just rubbing. He can never get it to work like it should do. And he's invested a lot of money in some lovely Hope calipers. They should be fantastic, but they're just not performing and they're always rubbing. What my colleagues did is they took a very quick facing pass, removed a little bit of paint overspray, and then things still weren't right. And if you come and take a look at this, you will see why. What is happening here, all I've done here is loosen this bolt and tighten this bolt. So this bolt right now is super loose, and this one here is nice and tight. And look at the size of that gap. That is at least 2 millimeters. However, if I back this one out, so they're both loose now, and tighten this one, you will see that we now have a gap just at the front here. So we have this mount here, which is on a bit of a slant, and probably both mounts which are on a bit of a slant. So what I want to do before we start cutting anything more is get the full understanding of exactly what's happening by taking some measurements, trying to figure out what's going on. Then we can make some much more informed decisions about how to actually correct this mess. Now, if you look at the Straumann frame fit specifications, the Shimano ones, or even the Hope ones, I've just got these because I'm working on some brake mount stuff as well. They actually give you all the frame fit specifications. Now, down here on the flat mount should be 34 millimeters between, but critically for the rear, it should be exactly 16 millimeters from the center of the axle to the top of those. It's a pain in the arse measurement to make, going from the center of a circle of an axle surrounded by this up to that surface. I'm going to show you how I'm going to try and measure it the best I can. It won't be super accurate, but it'll be accurate enough to at least decide which one to take material off, or indeed how to flatten them and then maybe add some shims. So this is the plan. Quick janky way of doing this is put the axle back in. Now we know the axle is 12 millimeters and half of 12 is 6. So we take that 6 off that 16 millimeters. So we're looking for a 10 millimeter gap now between the top of here and the axle, which is actually reasonably easy to measure. So I've just got a metal ruler here using this side of it and trying to keep it flat against that edge. And we can get in there with a set of verniers as best we possibly can. As best we can find a measurement that's coming out to around 10 millimeters. So I'm fairly happy with this back one. This one is a bit of a problem because let me just rest the ruler onto it and I can see that gap. Now, I suspect that the bottom edge of this is way too low, but if we try and bring everything down to this level, we know that we've got a little bit of stuff to play with. Next slightly janky measurement to make, because there's still a layer of paint here, so we need to assume some sort of paint uniformity, is putting a little set square on here, and we can just see whether the gap here is actually straight or not. And this back one is actually looking pretty good. You see the gap here is actually quite perpendicular. I've put this onto here, quite clearly see that we have an opening towards the top. So what these measurements telling me is that this rearward one is probably okay, but it's slightly on the high side potentially. So we've got some material to work with there if we need to. This front one is the really problematic one. One, it's on an angle that direction and it's on an angle downwards as well, which is causing all these problems. So I think the first thing to do is get the front one down to a flat surface so that we get rid of that inward slope, if you like, and then work out how much material we need to move from this one to bring everything down to the right level. Or if it's too big a gap by that point, we can put a shim in there to bring everything back up again so we have a nice flat mount. But I think the very first job, the most critical part of this, is making sure this front one is actually flat on both planes. So let's get started. So that I know how much I'm cutting and where the cuttings come from, I'm using some blue Dicam on here. This is like an engineer's blue, just going to stain the metal so that as we cut into it, we can recognise where those cuts have come from. Takes a few minutes to dry. You really don't need very much of it. So you go just a few turns, you can see where that cut is, taking that off exactly where you want it. This is the low part, remember. Now I can see it's starting to cut. So the reason I'm not using cutting fluid because I want to see for myself. I really don't want to take very much material off this one. So we've just taken a first pass of that and taken off most of that blue Dicam. There's still a little bit down here in this corner. We're getting a whole lot closer but we still have this little slope going on. So we're still low here, so we still need a bit more material off up here before we get back to a flat surface. Okay, lots of blue knob twiddling later, and I think we are there. Now, if I lay this ruler across here, we don't have that rocket effect any longer, which is fantastic. But if I look really, really closely, I can just see a tiny slither of light coming through, so it is not completely 100% perfect, but I don't want to remove any more material, already cutting it a little bit fine. What I've got here is I've just got an old brake mount, so I'm just going to illustrate the point to you. And with that bolt done up, we are flat there, which is looking good. If I whiz this one out, and we are flat there as well, so looking good. Let's get a caliper on and see what difference has that made to our alignment. Oh, look at that, so much better. So that bolt now is tight. You remember at the start of this video, we had like a big gap floating here. That is now completely flat. Yeah. When I'm aligning and brake, I'm a bit old school. I just like to do it completely by eye and just line it up. Okay, job done. I'm really, really happy with how that has turned out. It was a bit of a mess, but that is now spinning beautifully. Everything's lined up. Now, I'm sure you guys are curious to what else this bike was in for, because to be honest, when it first came into us, I was like, whoa, that's a brand new bike. The owner of this had looked after it so well. I swear to God, it was brand new. Not that it had done 20 or 1,000 so kilometers that he had said he'd done on it. He just looked after it so well. You have to look really clearly to see that it's done that sort of mileage. So what we discovered, apart from that, it was having a little bit of a problem with the bottom bracket area. And these are the Ingrid crank systems, and whoever installed it first, it sort of packed it out with loads of little weird plastic shims, and it wasn't really aligned properly. The instructions of this are really clear. You need an 11.5mm gap on the non-drive side to make sure that non-drive side crank fits properly. You also need to achieve that 42.5mm chain line. So what we actually did was go back to the instructions, make sure everything was correct, ended up fitting a 2.5mm spacer here on the drive side to get that chain line right, and to make sure the preload is at that 11.5mm. So that was all pretty straightforward once you just read the instructions. The next thing was the Hope headset, a couple of new bearings in there, pretty run-of-the-mill stuff, a couple of new bearings in the rear hub as well, and some pull springs. Like Hope hubs are notorious for just rusting away those pull springs, so we put some new pull springs in there as well. And that's it, job done. I hope you learned something from this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing to the channel, and of course, as always, get down there and add your comments. Have you ever come across this situation? Have you done something differently, approached it in a different direction? I would love to know, because we're all learning from each other here, so get down in the comments and please add your thoughts. Cheers.